All right, next up is and now he wasn't directly taking a shot at the Pac-12, but he definitely was. I mean, he certainly wasn't nice to the Pac-12. What is up, everybody? It is Jake with Master Football back at it again. Happy Thursday. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to be up to date on everything college football, pro football, Madden, EA college football, anything related to American football, hit the red subscribe button. You'll not be disappointed. Also hit the like button too. And if you're on Twitter, hit follow as well. Twitter fam is growing. Without further ado, let's get into the video. All right, guys. So again, the dog days are starting to end. We're starting to get closer and closer to some football. We're having the media days from a lot of conferences that are happening right now. One that was really interesting was yesterday, the beginning of the Big 12 media days. And I'll let you know, there was some good tidbits. There was like a little bit of slight trash talk, and there was some good perspective to be put on conference realignment. There's a lot of really cool things that discussed from John Kurtz's channel. And again, we're going to go to that video really quickly here because this was an awesome, awesome interview. All right, if you guys don't subscribe to John Kurtz, you're an idiot, okay? He's absolutely an awesome, awesome follow out there in the Big 12. I think he's an awesome one to talk about, college sports in general. He does even mention that he comes at it from a Big 12 and Kansas State slant. He is a Kansas State alumni, does a really good job out there for those guys. You say KCSN, Kansas City. So anyways, for him, he interviewed Big 12 Deputy Commissioner Tim Weezer. And again, he has a top quote here is, "I'd be shocked if we don't add members." There was a lot of really cool things to pull from this. First of all, let's talk and see who Tim Weezer is. So Tim Weezer here on the Big 12's media page, he is the Deputy Commissioner. And your boy, he started there in 2008, so he's been in seat for about 15 years. Prior, he was the Director of Athletics at Kansas State. And again, that's the big reason why John Kurtz, Kansas State guy, there was a connection there between those two guys. And then also, as a matter of fact, he was at Colorado State, a lightly mentioned team in conference realignment, and then also at Wichita State, a very lightly mentioned team in conference realignment from a basketball perspective. And again, whether or not there's anything to be moving there, I don't know, but I do know that your guy has a couple of connections with a couple of schools that are kind of in and around the Big 12, that area closely related to the Pac-12, Mountain West, the American with Wichita State. He's got a lot of connections here. From that interview, there's a lot to pull from that. We've got a couple things. Like I said, we're going to go over what he talked about with the Pac-12, what he talked about with the Big 12, and conference realignment in general. Let's go to those quotes right now. So a couple of the quotes that he had on conference realignment, some of these were really, really cool to put into perspective here. So he says that Texas's decision wasn't a financial one. When he means by that is when Texas was going from the SEC or from the Big 12 to the SEC, he's like, Texas has all the resources in the world. They're not hurting for money. I would argue that technically they could probably add more. I mean, you can always have more money. But again, whether or not it's going to improve their chances on the field, we will see. Actually, he even mentioned something about that later. He says they would rather get beat by Alabama than Kansas State, got beat by Florida than Iowa State, something to that nature. Basically, what he's saying there is the fact that it was more of like an ego play. He said that Oklahoma, he understood it a little bit more because Texas leaves. Oklahoma is going to be out there by themselves. Should it make sense they go with Oklahoma or with Texas? They make more money too. He was a little more understanding with that one. He's like, I don't really get the Texas situation. But again, he even mentioned he was a little, he got upset at the way that it happened, not necessarily that it happened. He eventually kind of got over that. But he even mentioned, he's like, it's not a financial decision. He's like, they got all the resources in the world. He thinks it's a prestige perspective for Texas. Another thing that he said too, he says, it's hard to say Missouri has benefited from a move in a competitive way. Same with Colorado and Nebraska. And we've gone over this before, how leaving a conference, and again, Ivan Mizell said this earlier this week on one of my videos, not on one of my videos, on a video that I covered, basically saying that the fact that like conference realignment really affects you from an overall perspective. There's some teams that could really do well with it, but for the most part, man, you just basically make more money and you are the same team that you are. Texas A&M is not quite a blue blood, but I think they are. But again, they make a lot of money. Trust me, they are doing just fine there. He even mentions that Texas A&M may be the school that benefited themselves the most when they made that switch out there. And again, I would argue I'd have to really see that. I mean, aside from the Johnny Manziel years, it's a little tough. They did have a good year during the COVID lockout. He says, but the reason they left has now joined the SEC, namely Texas. That's the reason why, hint, 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 what I'm going to say here is I believe eventually the Big Ten is going to make a call to Texas A&M. Whether or not they answer it, I think they'll answer it, at least listen. Again, I don't know. Nothing confirmed here, but I am saying that, like, if there's any team that the Big Ten could take from the SEC country, man, Texas A&M, that'd be a crazy one. Also has a very important line here. And again, I follow Genetics 56. If any of you follow Genetics 56 on Twitter, he does a really, really good job of covering a lot of, basically, I don't really know who he is, but he has really, really are good and well articulated points that he provides evidence for. Basically, especially around the Big Ten and all their conference realignment perspectives. However, he says, not he, this is what Tim Weezer said, Gen X 56 is under the impression that we're going to be in a situation where the Power 2, the SEC and the Big Ten are going to have so much money that the other schools can't compete. And Tim Weezer was like, okay, well, hold on a second here. If it was always just about spending money, Texas would be winning championships in every sport. And again, we always forget that. We assume it's like baseball, and in baseball, those big market teams, those big market teams have strengths, and the smaller market teams have strengths too, but there's ways to compete. Maybe you change it up in terms of the offense that you call it, or the defense that you call, who you recruit, whether or not you're a program builder or a program, maximizer or something like that, where you bring in a bunch of, transfers or things like that. It all just depends. I do know that for the most part, you can see a definite discrepancy between the teams that are in good areas versus teams that are in bad areas, teams that have administrations that want to win versus that don't, whether or not they, have good coaches or whether or not they do. A lot of those factors in here. Money is a factor in there as well. Your ability to recruit, your ability to, monetize that, your ability to basically just buy players. However, remember what I said before, is that up until somebody would rather ride the bench as a 4 or 5 star at, Texas or Oklahoma, or they could play right away at TCU or Texas Tech, they're going to play right away because that's just how it's going to work out. So he says right here, if it was just about spending money, Texas would be winning championships in every sport. They aren't. We can tell that there is power to money, but whether or not it leads to more wins on the field is not a 1-to-1 ratio. All right, next up is and now he wasn't directly taking a shot at the Pac-12, but he definitely was. I mean, he certainly wasn't nice to the Pac-12. Here's what he said, a couple of the quotes on the Pac-12. And again, these are paraphrases here. These aren't exact quotes, so again, don't quote me on even all of the items here on the conference realignment on the Pac-12 and then on the Big 12. These are all, paraphrases. He says here that the Big 12 was the school everyone was wondered if they were going to survive. And within months, it has now flipped to the Pac-12. He says it's kind of nice to have another conference defend themselves. Hey, here's what it is. He also continues on here, says, I don't know if there's any Pac-12 ADs that feel like the Big 12 is attempting to undermine their unity. Like I said, a paraphrase with that one here. A lot of people feel that the Big 12, Endeavor, Brett Yormark, they're putting some feelers out there. His perspective here from Tim Weezer, his quote, I don't know if any Pac-12 ADs feel like the Big 12 is attempting to undermine their unity. Now, it might not be the Big 12, but it might be somebody through the Big 12, might be a connected, a member of the media through the Big 12. I don't know that. That's all speculation on my part. He also says one of the greatest secrets in college sports is the Pac-12 deal right now. He said, and this right here is also a little bit of a shot too. He says, if we had something really good to talk about from a media rights standpoint, we would be screaming from every mountain we can find. The silence could state the opposite. So he's basically saying right there, he's like, if you had something, wouldn't you be telling about? Wouldn't you be floating around there? I mean, unless, of course, this is the most amazing conference realignment or media rights deal in the history of mankind. It's super new, super unique, whatever it is. He's kind of saying, if we had something that was really cool, wouldn't you want to tell people about it? And also the fact that it's not like anybody's going to be able to copy it. ACC's locked in forever. Big 10 just signed their deal. Big 12 just signed their deal. Maybe the SEC could do something at some point. But if the Pac-12 signs a really, really unique deal, nobody else is going to be able to move on that for a couple of years. They'll have a unique opportunity. But if it's not that unique of a deal, if it's not that creative of a deal, I don't know. That's what Tim Weezer said. Not me, Tim Weezer. And then last but not least, on the Big 12, he has a couple big quotes here. He says, we would be shocked if they don't add members, they being the Big 12. He says schools to be added would add, from a TV perspective, a pro rata share. That's very important, that pro rata perspective there. Very, very important. We're going to come back to that in a second here. Also said a desire to look west, and they need a travel partner in or around BYU. I know it's probably not in Provo, but basically, in that rough area. We're going to go into that here in a second too. Also, it says he does not see a need to add basketball, but could. He says basketball-only schools. He actually specifically mentioned the words Gonzaga came out of his mouth. Could make sense, but not necessarily for all sports. Existing schools in the Big 12 would not like that. And again, I think that's what we've said that Brett Yormark is forward thinking. He wants to do that sort of situation. But the rest of the teams in the league are like, Why would we add them in? He didn't mention UConn. He did specifically mention Gonzaga, and he was like, maybe we do a basketball-only deal. Whether or not Gonzaga would be okay with that, I don't really know, but I do know that adding Gonzaga completely as a full member aside from football, not a lot of steam behind that one. Okay, so we have to go over our assumptions here based on the things that he said. I've got 3 big assumptions. The first one, the fact that he said pro rata. Pro rata means that he thinks that he can get a P5 school. The way that it works right now with the Big 12's deal is that Fox and the Pac or ESPN are 2 of the partners for the Big 12. Fox wants to individually negotiate whoever gets added in. If you add a certain team in, they'll be able to negotiate how much more money they'll be able to add to the deal. Whereas ESPN has a pro rata clause, basically stating that if you add a Power 5 conference school right now, if you're able to take one over, we're automatically going to give you a certain amount increase no matter what. Doesn't matter who they are. Could be Oregon State. Could be Vanderbilt. Could be, South Carolina. Something like that. They would automatically improve that up. The fact that he said pro rata he thinks that they can get somebody from the P5. That's my perspective here. The second item here, it says, and I had a question, will they still add if they don't get a P5 school? And again, I put this out here. I know I got my Boise State stuff on, but Fresno State and Boise State would be cheap to add. First of all, they'd probably bring, I would say, they wouldn't bring a full $30 million per school to add them in there, but it'd probably being like, 5, no, not 5. I mean, they get paid more than that right now in the Mountain West. They'd probably get like $7 to $8 million in terms of additions per team, and then each school would accept like 6 because the Mountain West does not pay very much at this point. But again, that big question though, would they still add? He says that they'd be shocked if they don't add. Would they still add if they don't get a P5 school? That's a good question out there. So it also mentions here a travel partner around BYU. Very close teams are Utah and Utah State. And again, Utah was mentioned there. We're extremely close. They'd be a godsend for them if they got Utah. And then Utah State is close too, but not up there on the conference realignment scale. Close-ish teams are teams like Colorado. Colorado's not too far away from them. We're going 1 state over. Boise State is a former, rival of BYU's. I know that they don't play right now anytime soon. Then we have UNLV, who keeps on getting mentioned for some reason. The least watched and one of the least competitive teams in the Mountain West for some reason is going to be added to the Big 12. Yeah, we're going to go there. I don't really know. And then Colorado State, Nevada, and Air Force are close-ish. Let's go to the map and kind of see what we're looking at there. So you see here the fact that this green one here, and this is an older update. This right here is has them as an independent. Green means independent. And then we see that this purple is Pac-12, and then the light blue is the Mountain West. So we see the close teams, obviously Utah and Utah State, very, very close by. This over here is Colorado, and then we have Colorado State, Wyoming, Air Force. Boise State's not too far over here. Nevada's here. UNLV's right down here. Arizona's a bit of a ways away. We've got New Mexico right here, Arizona State, and then Arizona's down here. Still would be reasonable. I mean, not too far of a distance. Anybody who plays out west knows that everything is an airplane league. There's no bus leagues out here. But that's basically what he says. He wants somebody in and around BYU. Again, that is what's in and around BYU right now. And then last but not least, and this was a direct quote basically from him, is there does not seem to be much steam to the basketball schools. UConn wasn't mentioned, but Gonzaga was specifically stated to be an issue to add. Again, they would add them for basketball only. Every other sport, now people in Orlando got to go to Spokane. People in West Virginia got to go to Spokane. It would just be a whole situation there. Now, UConn's a little bit more interesting, reasonably close, really good basketball program. Their football program, they've got a 20 miles off-campus stadium in a place that doesn't really care about basketball. Or that doesn't care about football. Basketball is really good, but that doesn't. I mean, they're not hurting for basketball. It would be a couple more situations, a couple more items to kind of work through there to add UConn as a full member. But Gonzaga, he was really cool on that. Really interesting from that perspective here. Kind of takes some shots there at the Pac-12. States that Gonzaga is really not a team they're looking for. It also mentions that he would be shocked if the Big 12 doesn't add members. Now, the big question we've always had it, is Colorado going to be added? Is Arizona going to be added? Utah doesn't look like it. Arizona State doesn't really look like. I know we don't really have a lot of evidence there. But again, Tim Weiser, the deputy commissioner for the Big 12, is mentioning these things. We'll see what he means, because does he know something, or is he trying to sell something? You guys tell me right now. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you so much for being here. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. I really appreciate it. It's it for me, guys. I'll see you guys later. I am out.